This video is on how to clean the Archon Type B. If I'm moving too fast, feel free to pause and rewind as needed. If I'm going too slow, hit the fast forward button and skim through the video. To get started, you'll need a few things. A nylon gun cleaning brush, a 9mm size bronze bore brush, a 9mm size brass jag, a cleaning rod with a handle that allows the rod to spin freely, a brass punch, cotton swabs with an angled tip so you can get in between the rails and smaller spaces more easily, CLP, gun oil, a gun cleaning rag, 9mm size bore snake, cleaning patches, and powder-free latex or nitrile gloves. I prefer nitrile because they're more resistant to chemicals. You can get all of these items from your local gun shop, or if you want to have them sent to your house, I'll leave links to everything in the video description below as well as in the comments. I always start out with a clear and empty weapon, but of course I'm going to double check. To do that, locate the magazine release button, press it and drop the magazine. Keep your finger off the trigger, keep it pointed in a safe direction, work the slide. Nothing should eject because it should be empty. Now we're going to double check the chamber. To do that, locate the slide stop lever. As you're pushing upward on the slide stop lever, pull the slide to its rearmost position until the slide lever locks in place. I can see there's no magazine and there's no brass in the chamber, so we are 100% clear and safe. Press the slide stop downward to release the slide, let it go back home, and you have to pull the trigger in order to disassemble this. So go ahead and pull the trigger. And before you remove the takedown pin, I want to show you that you have to move the slide back about 1/8 of an inch. So I'm gripping it with my thumb, pressing forward, and around the top of the slide I'm wrapping my fingers around it and pulling back with my fingers. So forward with the thumb, back with the fingers. Now use the brass punch to push the takedown pin out. Now you can see that this takedown pin doesn't come all the way out. It's captive, so there's no chance of losing it. Now you can push the slide forward and remove it from the frame. To remove the recoil spring assembly, press it from chamber end to the muzzle end and it'll pop right out. You can see that it has a larger spring and a smaller spring. The large spring comes off and on. Don't worry about which direction it goes back on. When you reassemble, it really doesn't matter. Now grab this U-shaped block that's between the barrel lugs and pull it out. Now you can press on the hood area of the chamber and pull out the barrel. This is as far as you need to go for a basic field strip. You have the magazine, the barrel, the U-shaped block that goes around the barrel, the slide, the recoil spring assembly, and the frame. You don't have to clean these parts in any particular order. Today I'm going to start with the slide. By the way, if you find this video helpful, let me know in the comments and subscribe to my channel. Add a little CLP to the brush and start scrubbing all surfaces inside and out. And before I start doing the inside of the slide, I'm going to go ahead and mention that there's a couple of areas you want to be careful of not to leak CLP or oil down into. I'll show you those here in a minute. Be sure not to leak CLP down into this firing pin channel. You don't want to do that. And also be careful not to leak CLP or oil down into the breech face. That's where the firing pin comes out of, right there. If you're worried you might leak CLP down into those places I just showed you, just hold the slide muzzle end facing downward as you clean it. Use the smaller end of the brush to get in between the rails and the harder to reach areas. Now that you've broken up all the loose carbon and fouling with a nylon brush, add CLP to a clean cotton swab and go through it in fine detail. You'll see that the first few cotton swabs come out dirty. Just keep running clean cotton swabs through it until they start to come out clean. Now wipe off any excess CLP. Add gun oil to a clean cotton swab and apply a medium coat of lube to the rails and a light coat of lube to anything else that shows signs of metal on metal wear. Just remember to avoid leaking anything into the firing pin channel or the breech face. Now I'm just going to use the rag to smooth out any excess oil, give it one final wipe down, and that looks pretty good. Now let's get started with the frame. Add CLP to the nylon brush and start scrubbing all surfaces inside and out. And yes, you do need to scrub the outside of the frame, unless you don't mind getting lead contaminants all over your hand every time you pick up your gun. But I'm not going to leave the frame wet or slippery. I'm going to make sure I wipe off all the CLP and it's going to be completely clean, completely dry when I'm done. The rail channels seem to be pretty thin on this pistol, so I'm going to use the small end of the nylon brush to get the CLP in between those. Now I'm going to wipe off all the excess CLP from the outside of the frame. I'm going to make sure it's completely dry. The best way to remove the CLP from the stippling is just wrap the rag around the grip and squeeze. Now I'm removing the excess CLP from the inside of the frame. I'm also going to wipe the inside of the magazine well. There's no reason to leave CLP inside there. This is one of those places that could just collect dust if you leave excess CLP inside it. Now that you've loosened up all the dirt with the nylon brush and you wiped off the excess CLP, add CLP to a clean cotton swab and go through it in fine detail. Pay particular attention to the rails. You want to make sure those are totally clean so that the slide will operate smoothly when it's on the frame. Now wipe off any areas that may look oversaturated. There's no need for excess CLP. Add gun oil to a clean cotton swab and add a medium coat of lube to the rails and a light coat of lube to any other part that shows signs of metal on metal wear. Now let's clean the recoil spring assembly, add CLP to the nylon brush and start scrubbing in between the coils. Now you see how the spring comes off. This is a larger spring, so I'm not too worried about it in this case, but this is where a gun cleaning mat comes in handy. Sometimes if you're working on a firearm with smaller parts and smaller springs and pins and such, this mat comes in handy because it has these, we'll call them compartments, these little squares and rectangles you see. It keeps the parts from rolling off the table and onto the floor, onto the carpet or whatever, and it just makes your life a lot easier when you're cleaning a weapon. This mat's also much easier on the finish of your firearm, and it keeps your table from being exposed to cleaning chemicals. Now just wipe the excess CLP from the recoil spring assembly. Don't worry about which way this larger spring goes back on, it's going to be the same on both ends. Now clean this U-shaped block that goes around the barrel. Just add CLP to the brush and start scrubbing. Now I'm just going to use a cotton swab to clean it in fine detail. Now I want to leave a light coat of CLP on this piece, so I'm just going to lightly wipe it off with a rag. I'm just going to leave a small drop of oil on these parts that show signs of metal on metal wear, and I'm just going to smooth it out with a cotton swab. Okay, there's no CLP or oil running off of this part. It's just got a light coat of lube all over it, and that's just about right. Let's get started with the barrel. Add CLP to the nylon brush and start scrubbing all surfaces. I'm going to give the feed ramp special attention. I want to make sure that's totally clean and smooth so that the rounds can feed easily into the chamber. Now add the 9mm size bronze bore brush to the cleaning rod. Add a little CLP, and I'm only going to push it through in one direction, from chamber end to muzzle end, because it doesn't make any sense at all to push the dirt out and pull it right back in. It's kind of like sweeping the floor. You don't just sweep back and forth because you'll just spread dust everywhere. You sweep in one general direction, into a dustpan or out the door or whatever. If you want to do it the lazy way, you can just push it back and forth and that's fine, but I don't clean my firearms that way. I'm going to remove the bronze bore brush when it comes out of the muzzle end, take the cleaning rod out, screw the brush back onto the rod, push it through again, and just repeat the process. There's no specific number of how many times you need to do this. It really depends on how much you've been shooting. In this case, I'll just push the brush through a few times and move on. Now attach the brass jag. You can use plastic, but I prefer brass. Wrap a cleaning patch around it, add a little COP to the patch, and push it through in one direction, from chamber end to muzzle end. You'll see that the first patch comes out really dirty. Just keep pushing clean patches through until they start to come out clean. This gun wasn't very dirty. It only took a few patches. That one looks pretty clean. So now we can move on. You can check to see if you have the correct size bore snake by looking at the weight. It should say 38, which is the correct size for a 9mm bore. This step is very easy. Just drop the weight through the chamber. When the weight comes out of the muzzle end, just pull it through. You only need to do this 1 or 2 times and you should be good. If you look inside the bore after using your bore snake, you'll see that it looks better than it ever did coming from the factory. There won't even be a speck of lint or dust inside. It'll look like black glass. The rifling will look perfect and clean. That's about as clean as you're ever going to see the inside of the bore. I always recommend a bore snake every time. Now I'm going to add gun oil to a clean cotton swab and leave a light coat of lube all over the barrel. I'll add a couple more drops of oil to the outside of the chamber and spread it out with a cotton swab. And just like the other parts, I'm not going to leave anything so saturated with oil or COP that it's going to be dripping off. I'll be sure to clean off any excess oil with a rag before I'm done. You don't need to disassemble the magazine every time you clean it unless you dropped it in mud, dirt, or sand or something like that. This mag just needs a basic clean and wipe down. Just make sure to not leak COP down past the follower right here or through these witness holes. So go very light with the COP. Just add a little bit to the brush, scrub it on, wipe it off clean. It doesn't need to be lubricated. You can leave this magazine totally dry. Take note of the flat side of the chamber that I'm showing you on the camera right now. Insert the barrel into the slide like this. That flat piece needs to be facing up. It should look like that. I'll show you what happens if you try to insert it the wrong way. So if you try to put it in the wrong way, it's not really going to go in. It's going to look like that. So I'm just going to remove this, reinsert it the correct way, and that's how it's going to look. Take the U-shaped block, and this is also only going to go in one way. There's no way you can insert it the incorrect way. I'll show you. So this is the correct way. It's going to look just like that. I'll go ahead and take it out and show you what happens when you try to insert it the wrong way. So if I try to put it in the wrong way, this is what you end up with right here. See, it doesn't go in. Here's another close-up of what it looks like when everything's put together correctly. While I'm showing you this close-up, let me point out that this is the area that the recoil spring is going to rest up against. Insert the larger end of the recoil spring assembly muzzle end first, compress it, and rest the flat end of the spring against the piece that I just showed you. And here's a close-up. Just make sure it's perfectly centered on that flat piece. It should look just like that. Now line up the rails on the slide with the rails on the frame and push the slide back on. Now remember you have that captive takedown pin on the other side. Just pull the slide back about 1/8 of an inch as you're pushing in on that takedown pin. So I'm pushing in on the pin, I'm pulling the slide back, and you'll feel it snap back into place, just like that. So let's do a function check, make sure everything's put back together correctly. So I'm going to pull the trigger, but I'm not going to release it. I'm going to keep holding it. Work the slide. Now release the trigger. You should hear and feel it reset. Now pull the trigger again. If you hear it click, you're good. Now let's make sure the slide locks back on an empty magazine. So insert an empty magazine. Pull the slide back and it should lock back on its own without using the slide stop lever. If it does, everything's good. Just so you know, that slide stop lever is hard to release the slide when you have an empty magazine inserted, but it's not like that when there's ammunition loaded. There's nothing wrong with the gun, that's just the way it is. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, let me know in the comments. Like and subscribe, and visit skullcrush.com.